privilege be given to me to introduce someone that I know quite at personal level and professional level. Someone that I know is a person who very serious with responsibilities that's given to him, and I also want to acknowledge that he is no stranger to many of us. I don't know if anyone here that do not know him. He's been with us for a number of years at AIU. And since he left, he's still actually connected with us in many ways, teaching and research and many other things. But let me say a few words in regards to his academic and his professional contributions to academia. Dr. Daron is a Sabahan-born Malaysian, proud to be Sabahan, Malaysian. All right. Dr. Daron is currently a senior lecturer at the Center for the Promotion of Knowledge and Language Learning in the University of Malaysia, Sabah, UMS, known as UMS. And is currently responsible for many responsibilities, roles. He's teaching, he's also coordinating courses, developing modules, mentoring, contributing surveys, and organizing conferences, as well as conducting workshops for the institution. So he is a well-rounded individual who contributes a lot to the academic world. Prior to joining UMS, the University of Malaysia, Sabah, Daron taught at, before he went to Singapore, at the National University of Singapore as in the Department of English Language Communication. He's also working here at AIU for many years. In fact, he also studied here, right, Dr. Daron? and then work in the English department and continue his journey at the university in Singapore, one of the very well-known and a good university in Singapore. Along with his various teaching and administrative roles, Dr. Daron is also an external examiner and supervisor of graduate students who are doing their research at Asia Pacific International University, mainly in the Faculty of Education. So I'm so thankful that he is always supportive with the work that we are doing here at the master program here at AIU, especially in the Faculty of Education. So I must thank Dr. Daron for his willingness and helps. And also he's helping students in the Faculty of Arts Humanities as well. And he's also helping out doctoral students from other universities doing their research, their dissertations. Recently, Dr. Daron has been invited to speak in one of the research center at National College Chengchi University, Taiwan. And his talk was on the potential of using genre as the precursor to increasing students' appreciation for academic texts, research opportunities, and ethical challenges encountered when using online discourse as data. There's so much into this. I can't even understand what it is, but that just sounds very, very interesting because he's more into linguistics, more into language, and I think that is his passion. Dr. Daron is actively involved in conducting discourse-related research studies, and that's why he is here today, because his passion to share his skills and knowledge to people who in need. And some of his recent published research include "My Students Hardly Speak English: Do I still need to decolonize my teaching practice? A dialogue with a critical friend, published this year, and is published in Q1 for linguistic and language corpus. And the second one is, it feels like a performance when I teach online. Many of us can associate with this in the last few years when we teach online during the COVID. And he wrote this outer ethnography of tensions in teacher identity, published in 2023, and issues in teachers' professional development corpus Q1 for linguistics and language. I find, Dr. Daron, your topic is really, what do you call it, capture my, like you made it in a way that when I read it, something like, I want to know more about this thing. I think I need to learn. I need to ask you to rewrite my topic, title of my research. And this sounds very interesting to me. Of course, he has written many research and then published in a good standing, good journals of all over the world, actually. Based on the CV that I look at, he has actually published more than 30 pieces of research. He has also shared so many also other, and the chapter books and journals and blogs. He is everywhere. So everyone, if you want to find what he's doing, you write Daron Benjamin Liu, you will find all these contributions that he has, and I'm so impressed with that, Dr. Daron. You've been a great contributors to the academia world. Now, I don't want to prolong this, but one thing that I want you to know, many of us maybe do not know about another great God's given talent, skill he has. Not just teaching, research, but he is a great pianist. He can play piano like flowing water, like rain, and flawless. So I have the privilege to present songs, and he accompanied me, and I always enjoyed being with him. So when he left, I really actually miss him a lot, especially when we have this singing part in the church. And thank you, Dr. Daron. It's not just you're contributing to the academia, but you also use your talent, give God's given talent for the Lord, for the church, and for the community. And now I would like to all of us to welcome him, as he will be sharing with us another interesting topic. The topic is recognizing the haystack and looking for the straw. That is interesting. Haystack is a group of strays that bundle together, and you're still looking for the straw, right? That is so interesting topic. And this is called a sociomaterial examination of English language learning using the idiodynamic methods. So I'd like to, it's my privilege and honor to welcome you, Dr. Daron, and everyone, please welcome him with warm welcome. Thank you again for spending time with us, Dr. Daron. Thank you.
Dr. Yusri, can you give us the opening prayer first before he starts?
Sure, thank you. Let's pray together. Gracious Father in heaven, we would like to praise you for this opportunity. We praise you for waking us up today with good health and strength. And we'd like to commit this function into your care in a very special way. We ask you that you may use Dr. Daron Liu in a very special way as he imparts knowledge to us, that we may be receptive to learn, and above all, to implement what we are going to learn. Guide and direct in the process. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Yes, Dr. Daron Liu, now it is your time. And Dr. Jevamani, you can allow him to share your screen so he can share.
Yeah, I've already done that. Thank you very much. Sometimes I feel, whenever I am at an AIU event or, something that's organized by FAH, where I spent many, many years as a student and then as a staff, I feel like I'm a guest who doesn't quite read the room and who doesn't know when to leave. Like a guest that you want the guest to leave, but then he's just not reading the room properly. But I hope you don't feel that way. And I'm really glad and I'm very happy to come back. And I hope we can keep this going in different capacities. It doesn't have to be a formal one like this. I'm more than happy to even have a chat, an email correspondence with any of you, with regards to research or with regards to teaching, especially English language teaching. Before I share my screen, I'd first like to thank Dr. Jabba for approving and organizing this. And of course, most importantly, to Dr. Nakon, a very good colleague of mine. And thank you so much for thinking about me when you were planning to do this workshop. Thank you for the long introduction, Dr. Nelson. I was just telling Mrs. Diana that, I would rather you say, what my favorite food is and where I like to hang out, that kind of a thing. Because, for the next 2.5 hours, it's going to be serious talk about research. But no, in any case, thank you so much for that. And thank you, Dr. Yusri, for the opening prayer. We are all blessed with cognition, perception towards the world around us. And we have none other to thank than our Christ, Jesus, our Savior. Okay, without waiting any further, let me just share my screen. I try to make my titles interesting because if I don't attempt that, I will probably get bored myself. That's, I think, one thing that a lot of, maybe not a lot, I shouldn't be generalizing, but maybe something that people struggle with, especially if they have been doing the same thing, year in and year out. You have to find a way to spice things up for yourself to keep it going. So how I do this is normally, thinking of different metaphors, different analogies to see, if that can allow a new perspective, especially in terms of how I view research. Yeah. Just a little bit of preamble and, a readme, like a manual. My area of specialty is in applied linguistics, in English language education, teaching and learning. I do notice that there are some people here who are not from FAH, but it's fine. I hope you leave the session this morning with some good takeaways. But I do ask that you kind of, have a very measured expectation. Remember, I mean, I thought of and I planned of this talk for colleagues of mine at FAH. Yeah. So if you find some of the concepts or the approaches kind of contradictory to what you do in your field, that's good, actually. That means you're thinking actively about what I'm saying and comparing it with what you are doing. But yeah, I'm just asking you to kind of measure your expectation as to what you are about to hear from me this morning. Yeah. Also, I hope that all of you will be taking notes because, like what Dr. Jabba had said, we want active participation. I don't want to be the only one speaking throughout the whole session because this is a workshop. And for sure, I would like to hear from all of you. If you want to type in the chat your questions or comments, I would be more than happy to look at them. Or if you want to, pause the talk and ask a question, please do so. Better to ask immediately when you think of your question or when you think of your comment, because you might forget it if you wait until the very end. Yeah. So let's really have this in a workshop setting. Yeah. And like what Dr. Nelton had said, yes, I'll be talking about haystacks and straws in the context of Moklek. Sorry. In the context of Moklek, whenever I think of haystacks and straws, I always remember Osoko, the cowboy market, which is fun. We don't have things like that here in Sabah. Okay, oops. I skipped a few slides. So yeah, straw, which is something very common in Thailand, because of its industry. So I would assume that everyone has seen it before. If we relate that to our field of English language teaching, English language education, or even applied linguistics, it is a very, I think, appropriate metaphor to use to reflect our research focus. What do I mean by this? For many, many years, the conventional way to perceive research, especially in our field of language teaching, is to focus on one variable or a few variables that you can kind of control, that you can kind of manage, okay? So that has been what you call that, the focus. And we know, as people who teach language, or even those who teach communication, Mrs. Diana here teaches communication, there are so many variables to consider, so many factors that you need to account for, not only in the research setting, but also in the classroom, in the day-to-day, dealings in the classroom. Yeah. And I think especially in teaching, people are already moving away from the assumption that the teaching and learning activities happen on a linear progression, that things are causal. Just because you do something, just because you implement a particular pedagogical practice, doesn't mean you will get what you expect your practice would like to get. Yeah. And that brings me to the haystack, because everything is just everywhere, messy. Even if you try to kind of put the haystack together, roll it up, or kind of compact it into a rectangular kind of box, you will still have like remnants of straws kind of sticking out, right? Like when you comb your hair in the morning, you don't really want to put gel or any product on your hair. What you call that? You will still have a few strands of hair kind of sticking out here and there. Yeah. So it's never a neat process. That's what I am trying to say. When it comes to researching what happens, in language learning, in language teaching. Yeah. But yeah, going back to the straw, I think this is especially true in the 70s and 80s, when language research was trying to emulate scientific research where we can control everything. But I think people are moving away from that. That is why we have the haystack analogy. And like what I said just now,
แล้วเขามีลงทะเบียนไหมอ่ะไม่มีเขาก็จะเช็ค
I understood that. Has the person registered yet? My Thai is still okay, I think. Yeah, I think everyone, if you join, maybe like what Dr. Jiba had said, maybe mute the microphone first. Yeah. Oops. Siti Chai, if you can mute your microphone. I'm not sure. Mr. Siti Chai, yeah. Okay, where was I? So a haystack is made up of a lot of straws, right? Yeah. And again, like what I was saying, we are experiencing actually a shift, okay? Especially from the targeted focus, the micro focus, to something greater, to something bigger. And there are many, it's not just one factor that is bringing about this movement. It's not just one factor that is bringing up this, this shift in paradigm. But there are many different factors, and this is, I think, partially owed to what's going on in the world around us. We cannot really detach ourselves, especially when we want to do research in the classroom setting with participants. It doesn't have to be students, with participants who have lived actual lives. Their lives are not just shaped by what they go through in the classrooms with all of us, but their lives are also shaped by what goes on beyond our classroom walls. Yeah. So there's this awareness right now. I mean, I think all of us know that, but it is only becoming accepted in research in the past maybe 5 years or so. Yeah. I have a few questions here. You know, why is this happening? Why are we not looking at specific variables anymore? You know, before, I think when I was just kind of getting myself acquainted to academia 10, 15 years ago, for instance, yeah, it was very, it was almost a requirement for us to kind of, you know, collect data with a questionnaire. And the questionnaire is built with items. The items represent a variable. Maybe one variable has 5 items. Maybe you're testing maybe 5 variables. And if each variable has 5 items to kind of ask about, you know, that variable, then you have 25 items, for instance. Things have changed. If you also follow, you know, current research publications, what is being put out there, you can see that things are changing. One question that I always ask when I see something with a new method is that, oh, are we exhausted? Are we tired of doing the same thing over and over again? Just like what I said at the beginning, you know, sometimes we have to think of novel ways of approaching things just to kind of keep ourselves motivated, just to kind of, you know, spice things up in terms of doing research. Yeah. So is the field exhausted? Are we doing the same thing over and over again? And this leads to the next question. If people are exhausted, are we looking at efforts by some other researchers to reinvigorate the field, to kind of put a new perspective to how we, you know, do things that we do every semester, what you call that, and you know, trying to find a new appreciation for that thing. I think personally, you know, trying to reinvigorate my professional work, my professional life has been, I think, at the top of the list, because since leaving FAH, since leaving the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, I don't know whether this is a good thing or not, but I've been teaching the same thing over and over again. So I think that partially contributed to why, you know, I always have to make a very deliberate and, you know, yeah, I have to make a very deliberate and conscious decision about, okay, yes, I'm going to be teaching the same class again next semester, but let me do it this way instead, you know, so that I don't get bored. You know, when the teacher is bored, the students get bored too. If, you know, there's no joy in teaching. So yeah, I think partially for myself, it comes from that as well. Yeah, I've been here at UMS for about 4 semesters now. And yes, I've been teaching the same type of class that I have been actually teaching since I was in Singapore. And I was there for 7 years. So you can just imagine, sometimes I'm at my wit's end, because I'll go into class, before class, sorry, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this again. So yeah, yes, reinvigorating something that you've been doing, you know, over and over is very, very important. Which leads to the next point here. Do people need an epistemic break? Okay, this is a question, a philosophical question that was first asked. Well, it was actually asked by scholars from the Global South, actually, from India. But it was made prominent by Kumaravadivelu, Barj Kumaravadivelu. And hello, Wipapon, you have a question? Okay, anyway, back to Mr. Dr. Kumaravadivelu. I think he's a good person to kind of have a foundation for when we are, you know, considering the metaphor that I'm about to explain further, you know, the haystack and the straw, because he is the one who explained why it is necessary for us to have an epistemic break, especially for us here in this part of the world. We cannot just be churning out and kind of replicating, you know, research or perspective that, you know, originate from the seat of power, especially with regards to research in applied linguistics, with regards to research in English language teaching. So Kumaravadivelu has always advocated for an epistemic break. Look for something that is really, really local, really, really unique to your context. And there is there is a market for that, whether you like to think of research as a neoliberal construct, whether you like to think of research as a game to play. I mean, I think whether we are at AIU, wherever we are, whether we like it or not, it has an impact on us, this thing with publication, especially sharing research. Yeah. If you're asking if there is a space for things like this, yes, there is a space. I think what Dr. Nelton had shared, like one of my papers about, questioning whether or not I need to decolonize my English language teaching practices in a context where English is hardly spoken. I think personally it's a valid question, and the reviewers of that paper think it's a valid question too. Even though Malaysia considers itself as an ESL context, because because of our colonial past, I think it's more EFL. It was probably ESL when Dr. Rita and Dr. Nelton were students, because I think the number of English-speaking Malaysians was higher at that point. I mean, what I'm observing right now in my classes is that I can ask a simple question like, what is your study program? And the students are just like, oh, what is this? What are you asking me? So I think things have shifted. A lot of people still think Malaysia is ESL, but personally, based on my classroom observation, it really isn't. So yeah, again, back to the question, is there a market for things like this? Definitely there is a market for this kind of research where you are looking at issues or concepts that are really local or contextually implanted in that in your situation or in your circumstances. Yeah, we don't always have to fall back on or revert to concepts which have been advocated from other parts, other cultural contexts in the world. Yeah, so far so good, everyone. Yeah, okay. Oops, I've skipped a few slides. So yeah, the haystack, back to the haystack. I'll keep talking about the haystack. I don't know why I picked haystack. If I look at maybe because I'm seeing a lot of things like haystacks these days. We are having a very serious drought problem here in Sabah, and there has been fires everywhere. And at the university, it's just brown everywhere, and we don't have water. It's the second day we don't have water actually here at the university. Yeah, so maybe that's why the haystack metaphor really appealed to me in this point of time. Yeah. Anyway, we know that researching language is a very complex process, and I think it can be extended to any social science field. Okay, when we are dealing with human beings. Human beings are complex beings. We not only have cognition, we have emotions and other factors that we always have to consider. And these things can have an impact on how we do research. Okay. So yeah, language is a very complex phenomenon. And it can be complex regardless of where we are observing it, whether it's in the classroom, which is something that I think we have to be aware of. Just because we do research in the classroom doesn't mean that that research setting is entirely controlled. We have to have a lot of disclaimers as to perceiving the classroom as a controlled environment, because it's not like a lab. Yeah, the classroom setting. So that's one thing. But yeah, at least in the classroom, we can introduce some sort of intervention, like introducing a new task, introducing a new activity, introducing a new way of teaching. So there is a level of control over there. Or in the wild, in the natural setting, which is a concept that was introduced, I think about 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, learning in the wild, but it never really took off. Researchers like to have things under control. They want to account for things for which they can explain. And when you kind of let go of the rein for the horse and let the horse kind of just run around, it makes it difficult to grasp, they think it's difficult to grasp concepts and to kind of talk about it in a coherent way. But thankfully, I think the doors are opening up for research like this. There's a greater acceptance, a greater recognition about things that happen in the wild. Wild here refers to just people or things which are, not necessarily controlled in its natural setting. Okay, yeah. So like what I said a while ago, what you call that? Yeah, so it's complex because there are so many factors involved. Yeah. And this is not only because of this does not only affect language learning, but also pedagogical practices and also the larger language education realm. Yeah. I mean, if we want to, for example, if you want to do a self-study or if you want to do a lesson study, that's an approach in educational research, a lesson study where you examine how someone teaches, not just one portion of the class, but from beginning to end, and see how things are related, see how things contribute to the greater curriculum, see how things contribute to the bigger aspirations of the school, things like that. Yeah. And I just explained that if you want to do a lesson study, it is not just looking at what makes a lecturer or a teacher decide on certain things in that classroom, but you want to contend with the factors not immediately present in the classroom, but also around the teacher. Okay, that one is called the lesson study approach. And quite a number of people have actually looked on this as a research approach, what you call that, to use in their own teaching. It's kind of like action-based, classroom research, but it's not just focusing on the classroom. So lesson study, you need to take into account everything, for example, in my class over here, we have to teach towards C2 level for SAFR. So C2 is the highest proficiency level for SAFR. So that's always at the back of my head. So, I'm teaching a basic proficiency course here, but that is always at play at the back of my head, because at the end of the semester, I need to, in my report, I need to detail what is it that I did to help my students, move towards that proficiency level. So yeah, everything that we do is affected by what is around us. Again, we have to think of things as a haystack. It has everything in it. Yeah. Coming back to the straw, I hope the organization of my presentation is not confusing, because I'm gonna go back and forth so that you will keep what you call it, you'll keep thinking about what I say, so that you'll pay attention. I need people to be thinking and questioning what I say. Yeah. Like what I said just now, in a controlled environment, it's okay, it's comfortable, because we really can focus on a few variables. This kind of research still is marketable. You can still publish research papers like this. One thing though, one point to contend is that the analysis has to be novel, or the analysis has to be advanced. Yeah, you really have to either use very advanced statistics, or you need to look at what you call that, a novel approach of maybe collecting data and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, research focusing on one or a few variables, yeah, we can still find that, but then you will notice that analysis is more complicated, I would say. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there are a few reasons for this, for focusing only on one straw or on a few variables. One is the perception that we need to be objective in our research. Okay, so when you have fewer variables to manage, it kind of helps you to maintain this semblance of objectivity. Okay, yeah. Another one is when you are focusing only on one or a few variables, you can talk about generalizability. And I think in our case, as English lecturers or education lecturers, we have to be super careful with generalizability. That was one thing that I always thought about, I think, when I was in my early years in academia, but this is it has kind of gone down my list, because I know that, first of all, I can never get a hold of a huge sample size to claim generalizability. Most of my research is done in my classes. you know, the biggest class I have is only 30 people. And so, I mean, if I want to do convenient sampling, you know, do the research with my students in my class, even if I have 60 students, I don't think I can claim generalizability, especially if I'm looking at 1 or 2 variables. That would make it even more difficult to say that, okay, you know, the findings can be extended to such and such, you know, yeah. But yeah, when you do have a few variables and you know, you have a huge, or you know, your sample size is big enough, then probably you can advocate, or you know, aim for some level of generalizability. Yeah. One variable definitely allows you to provide enough elaboration. I think today with the explosion of what you call it, information around us, and because of the internet, we have access to all sorts of details out there. And having just 1 variable or 2 variables in your research, you know, as the foci, if you have 2 variables, would allow you to elaborate sufficiently. I think you will have more than enough information, probably not enough space in one paper to talk about those things. Yeah. Which brings me to the next point, to be able to publish within journal parameters. I was just in an HBDS meeting. That's why I was a minute or 2 late. Apologies for that. But this was one of the things we were talking about just now, whether or not we want to redefine the parameters for HBDS, because we are increasing the number of papers we want to publish every issue. So everyone, if you have a paper that is lying around and it doesn't have a home yet, please do consider HBDS. That's my pitch, sales pitch for HBDS right now. Yeah. But yeah, sorry. So that was why people normally focused on the straw, or why people normally focused on 1 or 2 variables, or not too many. What you call it? I'm working on a project right now, research project, and it only has 3 variables. And yeah, because yes, it'll make things easier for me. But yeah, like what I was saying just now, there has been a shift, there has been a movement in our field, and people are now, I think, more open to consider the haystack. Okay, like what I was saying just now, there is this shift towards embracing the wild. For my colleagues here who teach English language, one of the seminal studies, I can't remember the author's name. I'll try to look for it later. But this came about from learner engagement. The whole concept of learning in the wild. How do students engage, not necessarily with the teacher in the classroom, but how do students engage with what is being learned? Does the engagement happen only in the classroom, and then, you know, once the bell rings, the student goes to the next class, the engagement turns off like that? Or does the engagement, is there residual engagement that kind of happens even after the class has ended, or even after the semester has ended? Do students still think about what you call that, what was learned or what was taught after that? It didn't really take off because I think it was published in the wrong time. I think that paper, again, I'll look for the author later and share it with you. It was published in 2009, when I think during that period of time, people were still very keen on you know, very clear, very objective kind of findings, rather than something that you know, when you report, you can't really control, you know. Because if you just imagine having to write a paper about students' engagement with what is learned after school hours, you know, you're going to end up with very, very messy data. So I think at the point when this concept was extended into our field of language education, it did not get a lot of pickup. I mean, take up. Yeah, people didn't take it up as they are. But I think it's changing now. People are looking at it more seriously. Takes 10 years, yeah, for people to take something seriously. So yeah, so there has been this shift, and thankfully this has been spearheaded by qualitative researchers. I am a qualitative researcher, but I am also open to quantitative research for sure when it is appropriate to do quantitative. I never dismiss quantitative approaches. Yeah. But of course, my comfort is found in qualitative analyses. Yeah. And also, again, I think this point has been repeated many times. I think there is already an acceptance of how complicated learning is. Yeah. Okay. So what does wild learning in the wild mean? Okay, Wagner here defines it as the everyday experiences that we have, the mundane life world, the wild affords learning in so many different ways. And the interaction and learning about the world can become two sides of the same coin. So meaning, what we do in the classroom can actually be supported, or actually what happens outside the classroom may sometimes be even more memorable or probably more effective than what we experience in the classroom. Maybe what we teach to students in the classroom will only serve as a trigger for what the students had actually experienced outside, and perhaps the experience outside was even more, enriching or even more impactful to their learning. Yeah. So yeah, again, there is this call to embrace everything, just like how instead of picking just one straw, kind of look at the whole haystack. Yeah, that's where I'm going with the metaphor. Has there been any experience by any of my colleagues here, the lecturers especially, where you found out that students understood something better from the experience outside of your classroom and not not because of what you did in the class? Maybe you can share about this later. But this does happen, there are days when, and this happens to me, I teach every day from Monday and Wednesday is my heaviest day. And I must say, even though Wednesday I have made improvements to the content because I teach the same thing over and over again, right? From Monday to Wednesday afternoon at 4. But by the time I teach it like the third or fourth time, I'm so tired of it already. So even though there's something new that I added, but maybe my enthusiasm is not there anymore because it's the same thing that I taught on Tuesday, the same thing that I taught on Monday. And what you call that? So maybe what I had told them, they might have learned it better in another context, and not from my class. Yeah. Yes. So I think you should be, for those of you who are teaching different classes, be very, very grateful that you're doing that you have the privilege to do that. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, coming back to the haystack and looking at other straws. Once we open our eyes, unlock the door, open our doors, and consider other variables, we really have to take into account the vista, the view ahead of us. Of course, when we do research, it is also impossible for you to take into account every single thing. That's not possible, especially if the intended outcome at the end of the day is to get a paper out. You still have to have some control over what it is that you include in your research. You still have to take control over how many straws you're gonna use to make your haystack. Okay. So yeah, the opening up of perspectives and considering all possibilities. I just mentioned these things. And just to kind of relate this back to the concept of an epistemic break. Let me just explain to you why Kumaravadivellu talked about this. One of the reasons why he talked about this was because, and I struggle with his work actually. Because he is always advocating for, practitioners like all of us in this part of the world. But then sometimes I feel like he's in an ivory tower because he's working in one of the Cal State unis in the US. So, but he's speaking, and of course, I mean, you don't have to be in a locality to talk about the issues, the challenges faced by people in that locality. You can be somewhere else for sure. But then I think personally, I sometimes struggle with that because, you are a tenured professor in San Diego, one of the Cal States there, and then you're talking about the struggles of an English teacher in some rural village in India, like, then I'm like, it's like I have some sort of cognitive dissonance there because, because I asked, how can you really truly understand the struggles of that teacher because you're somewhere else? Yeah. But I mean, I'm not trying to discount his work, but I think his discussion about an epistemic break is so important because it does give room for us to champion the causes, the experiences that we have on this part of the world. Yeah. So with this epistemic break, what is it that we are trying to achieve? One is, of course, to really focus on the locality. Really focus on the locality. So instead of looking at the haystack that's you know, in a different country, what maybe China has a lot of haystacks too, or Mongolia, because you know they have a lot of plain fields there. So instead of going to Mongolia to look for haystacks there, I mean, look at haystacks that you see in Osoko, you know, in Moklek, something that really is there in front of you, and you are living it, you're living through it, you're experiencing it. One person that I really would what you call that, ask that you consider in terms of scholarly work that focuses on a very local haystack is just give me a second, yeah, is Matthew Ferguson. I don't know if he's still at Mahidol University. Just give me one moment, everyone. Oh yeah, he is still at Mahidol University. But I think I really appreciate, I really am grateful for his work because he really looks at the haystack locally. I just typed his name in the chat. Yeah. I think one paper that all of us should take a look at that he had published is with regards to the use of English in an international university. Even though he doesn't reveal where the university is, I think like Achan Nakon, Dr. Nakon, if you read the description, the context, you will immediately know where that, because we don't have a lot of international universities up north in Thailand. Yeah, but I think his work is groundbreaking. It's also reinvigorating because he really is speaking for the local there. He's American, but he really is speaking of the local issues there. So I think if we want to look at the local haystack, I think, and if you want to draw inspiration, I think his paper would be a good starting point to kind of see what you can do in your own research. Yeah. So the first thing there, a return to the locality. And then the next thing is the interest in the contextual, you know, really paying attention to what you call that, to what is going on, you know, culturally speaking, linguistically speaking, looking at those things. Yeah. Again, Ferguson also talks about this. I'll give you a few other references later on that you can kind of, you know, take a look at. Some of their papers are free, so which is great. Then you can kind of take a look at what it is that they write. Bringing the attention to the context has also been my what you call that, my own personal research agenda. I really want to highlight, you know, what is it that happens in my context, rather than just kind of saying, okay, this is how my classroom is set up, I did this, and this is what I found, and this finding relates to that theory, the end. No, I'm trying to kind of move away from that already. I'm trying to really add to the significance of the context. And what you call that, I think for me, this epistemic break for me happened a few years ago. Again, I was getting a little tired and exhausted from doing the same kind of research. Dr. Nakon and Dr. Rita would know this of me because we've worked on a few papers together on using narratives, right? Dr. Nakon and Dr. Rita. And I think at one point I was like, oh my gosh, narratives again. So I was trying to understand, you know, what is the essence of, you know, narrative inquiry? What is the essence of narrative studies? And I found out that narrative studies, what you call that, are still very relevant. It's still a very useful method, a very current method that's still being used today. But we have kind of veered off from what the seminal scholars intended it to be. So, this brought me back to, those who had talked about narrative inquiry 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and try to see what is it that they were hoping for at that time, and comparing it to what we are doing now. And one thing that I noticed that was really missing was the context. The context is always missing from a story. And I think Dr. Jeba and just now I saw Mr. Joy Kutapan, who are both literary experts. You cannot understand literature fully until you also kind of understand the author and the context of the author and when the piece was written, right, Dr. Jeba? Those things also you need to consider when you want to have a full understanding of why that poem was written, why that story was, things like that, right? You cannot just focus on the literary piece itself. You have to look at, yeah. So that was actually the intention of narrative inquiry as well. You have to take into account the greater context, not just the story that was told at that point. So this led me to realization, because there are a lot of narrative inquiry studies being done in our context in Asia, but then it doesn't say anything about Asia. It just talks about, okay, this teaching issue, that learning issue, this teaching problem, that teaching, but surely the context should in a way explain why that challenge is there, why the teaching challenge is there, why that learning challenge is there. Yeah. That led me to a realization. And I did write a critique on this, of how narrative inquiry studies are being done these days, which caught the attention of a very prominent researcher who is based in Japan, also uses a lot of narrative inquiry. And he did not agree with what I was saying. The issue I was the issue I was contending was kind of like the case of Kumaravadi Velu, where you are in a different locality and you're talking on behalf of other people. So I find that sometimes this person's research sounds like that as well. And this particular paper that I was critiquing was so he is a male researcher, but and of course we want the man to champion causes for women as well. So he was doing that, but I felt that him representing himself as really knowing the struggles of a woman, the struggles of a mother in academia, I felt was a little too much. So I was kind of critiquing, you're not a mother, you're not a wife to someone. You can never say that you really understand the struggles faced by women in academia. Yeah, so he contacted me, but I still consider myself young and naive, maybe. So I don't have the courage yet to respond. He emailed me last year, actually. I never responded to him. Maybe in a few years' time, once I get a little bit maybe older, I'll probably be more courageous as I get older in time. Yeah. But yeah, again, the interest of the context, I think that is very, very important, especially if we are really looking at, understanding something meaningfully, especially in a way that improves our practice. It improves our sense of self in our professional workplace. Yeah, we really need to kind of look at the haystacks that we can find in Osoko one more time. Yeah, rather than something that is found elsewhere. Now, another straw. A while ago, I talked about how people are opening the gates and looking at things in the wild, looking at things in the open field. So that's one straw, and that's one approach of looking at research that is happening in the past few years. Something else that has been supporting this view, that you don't have to look at stuff or haystacks that you find in Sabah, for example. If you're working in Moklek, look at your context in Moklek or look at your context in Thailand. Another research area that has been really, I think, what you call that, encouraging this kind of movement is the recent focus on justice, especially in language education. Yes, Dr. Jabba, you have a question.
I was just wondering, what if we have learned when I was maybe in my kindergarten in my village learning a school, and then I now think about it back. How was my teacher and how was my experience, and could I not do about considering that as my
Dr. Juba, I'm sure you yes, I think I mean and I'm surprised. I mean, this comment coming from you because you're a lit person, and in lit studies and lit studies, I think these days are has a huge impact on what we do in ELT and applied linguistics. One concept I teach in my English for research purposes class. So I teach a writing class here that focuses on understanding how research papers are written. But like what I said, because I've been teaching this over and over again, even before I came to Sabah, the reading list I normally change every semester or every academic year. And last semester, I actually took a lot of papers from literature, literary studies. And one of the things that came up was memory studies, yeah. And it's a huge thing in novel studies or in literary studies in general. And yes, my answer is yes. Retrospective. I think I had a private conversation with Dr. Rita about this as well. How you remember something. So yes, it is possible. Of course, you really need to think carefully about it. You will have to think about how you present your case and things like that, and support it with a firm and solid conceptual foundation. But yeah, it is possible. I mean, if it's possible in lit studies, I think it's possible in our field as well, applied linguistics or English language teaching. Yeah. So yeah, retrospection is I think an accepted what you call that approach. I mean, if you want to look at what you call that an experimental design as well, like you have your pre-test, right? And then you have your post-test, and sometimes researchers add a post test or a post interview, like maybe 2 months after the fact that something had happened. That is kind of like memory studies in a way, because you're trying to ask them what they remember from 2 months ago, 3 months ago, when they were involved in that experiment of yours. Yeah. So yeah, it is possible. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Daron.
No,
I
no
was
problem.
just thinking about when you talked about the haystack and when you're not in that, some locality, or can we consider that one also as a haystack that is, very many years ago, and then you write about it, just that. Thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah, I think if you premise your study on the correct theoretical perspective, then yes. I mean, if you kind of premise your study based on like how experience shapes practice, then yeah, because experience is made up of, past things that had happened in our lives, then yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because of the explosion of information and research in the world today, I think it's almost impossible for you not to do something. I mean, in comparison to maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago, where our approach to doing research was pretty, I think, standard in a way. Yeah. But yeah, coming back to this slide, we have another aspect of research, which is allowing us to look at the wild, meaning kind of shift our gaze to look at what is happening in our backyard rather than looking across the pond to see what's going on over that side. So we have people like Kubota, who I like her work as well, but similar to Kumaravadivelu, I seem to have a problem with people who work overseas, right? She's based in Canada, I think in British Columbia, UBC, University of British Columbia. But she writes a lot about at least she's writing from her own perspective, her own experience, and this can answer what Dr. Juba asked a while ago, because I think some of her papers are based on they start with a memory that she had about, you know, first joining the field of applied linguistics. Yeah. But yeah, in recent publications, she has talked about, you know, how we really should advocate for our own locality, our own context. Barnawi is also, I think, a very important scholar. I can't remember which African nation he is at right now. I think he's an important scholar because he is able to look at religious perspectives as possible lenses for qualitative research, which I think is very important. We haven't really, I don't really see that, I think, for example, in Christianity or specifically among Adventism. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but yeah, he's been able to do that very sensitively and very effectively. Selvi is also, I think he is based in Australia. And he talks about stolen subjectivities. This is what I was saying about, you know, someone being your voice somewhere else, that kind of a thing. You know, they come in, talk to you, understand what your struggles are, understand what your challenges are, and then they go back to the institution and then publish about your experience, you know, over there. But how does that benefit you as the participant, for instance? Yeah. And then the last one there, Makoni and Idem and Rudwig, decolonizing applied linguistics in Africa and its diasporas. Yeah. So you have a lot of these things happening on the peripheral. We should not say that they don't have an impact on how we do research in applied linguistics, because they actually do. Another topic which is kind of up and coming right now is reparation. How do you spell reparation? Reparation. Okay. Thank you for turning on the spell check in what you call that in Zoom. I must admit, what you call that, since coming back to Sabah to work, my Malay has improved tremendously, but I noticed that sometimes I lose control over my English because you know, here everything here has to be done, almost everything has to be done in Malay. And sometimes I have to teach my English classes in Malay too, because if I speak only in English, it'll just kind of go over their heads, you know, and 3 hours wasted if you know, if I just speak only in English. Our classes here are 3 hours per session. Yeah. So yeah, this is definitely happening, and what these scholars are advocating for is that, okay, everyone, we should, you know, really look at what is happening in our classrooms, in our locality, think of ways, analytical methods to understand these things. Just like the person just now, Matthew Ferguson, he talks about the use of English in an international university in Thailand, and he looks at it from the concept of Thainess, which is something that has already been discussed by Thai sociologists. You know, what does it mean when you do something with Thainess? Yeah. Okay. Something that can also be done, I think, in the context of AIU. You know, what I mean, a simple one would be what does internationalization mean in the context of AIU? That's one thing. And I think how we perceive internationalization there at AIU is very different from you know, other universities, because the principal foundation of AIU is also our church, and our global church. That will definitely have an impact on how we view internationalization, which makes us distinct from other you know, views about internationalization. Yeah. So yeah, I think we can thank these scholars for kind of opening up. You know, in women's studies, they always talk about breaking the glass ceiling, right? So if I want to borrow that expression here, they have kind of helped us kind of break that glass ceiling as well, and allowed us a space for us to talk about what is happening to us ourselves, and you know, without having to extend our discussion to things which are remote to us or things which are distant to us. Yeah. This, again, in summary, has allowed us to decolonize monolithic and dominant discourses about applied linguistics, especially English language teaching and learning. I mean, one very, very obvious observation, I would say, in the context of Asia is communicative language teaching. I'm sure all of my colleagues here who teach English have heard of this before, right? I don't think CLT has really taken off in Asia, because one of the prerequisites for CLT is that the interlocutors can speak, they have enough language proficiency to carry out a conversation or a communicative event in English. And that is the reason why TBL, task-based learning or problem-based learning, has actually flourished in our side of the world, because the focus is not so much on the communication, but on the task or the problem that needs to be solved, or the task that needs to be done. Yeah. So we have these things, CLT. We don't really need to do CLT. And in like my context, right, where my students, no shade on my students, but really that is the reality. If you come into my class, you will notice, I think in the first 10 minutes, if you're just speaking in English, then yeah, you will notice that, oh God, they probably don't understand a thing. Yeah. If everything is done in English. So I mean, like, concepts of decolonization, do I actually still have to do that? Because I think my students are still very much in tune with their Bahasa Melayu identity. So when they are very comfortable, when they're proficient, and they can carry out tasks in for another language, but operating in the national language in Malaysia, then does this movement to decolonize our English language classroom, is it necessary in my context? So just now Dr. Nelton had mentioned that publication that I had this year, and that's the question I was kind of reckoning with. Yeah, whether or not I really need to decolonize what I do in my English classroom, for the fact that, for the most part, I'm speaking in Malay. Yeah. So some of the things that people have also introduced, besides what I had shared just now, are these two subpoints here. A move away from viewing our students as being deficient. That's why translanguaging, I am telling you, is something that is really up and coming. Translanguaging in different aspects of what you call that, English language education or language education in general. Dr. Nakon, you are also doing work on translation. I think there are a lot of actually special issues dedicated to translanguaging and translation, if you look at the journals today. Yeah. So a move away from looking at our students as being deficient, and also looking at them as having a wide linguistic repertoire, because that's the whole point of translanguaging, that students have more than one linguistic tool for to their disposal. They can use different kinds of languages to kind of help them with different things. So there's that movement as well. And when your students are able to do that, right, they can do something in a few languages. I mean, and then is the claim that they are deficient in terms of their language ability, does it still hold true? I mean, people will start questioning, because they're able to carry out tasks, solve problems, even with what you call that, developing proficiency in English. Yeah. So there has been that movement there to kind of move away from this, and the validation of other languages. Of course, this needs to be taken in consideration of the context. Okay, I mean, I know there are some places where it's almost illegal in the English classroom to use another language to speak. Another language to teach. But yeah, give and take. It really depends on where you are from. But in general, not in general, at least in the world of research and research, there is this movement where other languages do have a place in the classroom. And again, this is not something new. I mean, I remember taking many years ago with Mrs. Diana's sister, Mrs. Fiona, and we took, what was that class? Methods of TESOL or something like that. Was it with Dr. Rita? I don't know if I took it with Dr. Rita or Dr. Beulah. I can't remember now. Maybe Dr. Beulah. But I mean, the place of other languages has always, there has always been a place of other languages in the English classroom. I mean, grammar translation method. I mean, it's always been there, but then just like how it takes several years for a concept to be embraced, right? Translanguaging, yes, we've been talking about that for a few years now, but people are kind of just warming up to it in recent years. Yeah, but I think it's a topic that would continue on for the next few years. I think it's a topic that will be productive in the next few years. Yeah. So something for you to consider if you don't have a research topic at the moment. Yeah. Okay. And why are these things or this concepts important? Because they actually are contributing to how we reimagine how we teach our class. So again, remember just now I said about, shifting your gaze. Don't look for haystacks across the seas and the oceans. Look at the haystack you find in Osoko or in your backyard. And that can actually help us reimagine not just how we teach the class, but how we conduct research. I think that's very important, okay? How learning is supported, how materials are used, and how students' roles in the classroom are reconfigured. For example, one thing that I have always wanted to do when I was working at FAH, but never got to do, was actually trying to understand how things that happen in the dorms, because dorm life is pretty active. I think more so now than when I was a student. How do those things actually shape the communication practices, the learning approaches of students in the actual classroom? Sometimes I feel that what they experience, in their everyday life, as some of them are full boarding students, right, living in the dorm full time. I feel like those things will have a very significant effect on what they actually bring in the classroom, because they're only in the class for like 2 hours, 3 hours in a day, right? And then the rest of the day they're in the dorm, interacting with their roommates, their suite mates, and things like that. That has been what you call that, a point of interest for me. I think for many years I just never got to do it. So if anyone wants to look into that, I would be very, very interested to partner up with you. Another sales pitch here. My first one was on HBDS just now. Yeah. Yes, Dr. Rita.
Okay.
Hard questions, yeah, Dr. Rita. No hard questions.
No, I am just looking at the, this concept of moving away from viewing students as being deficient, because basically that has been a way of looking at students in the classroom. They are there because they don't have enough of whatever it is. And then they're supposed to move from A to B and B to C and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So seeing them as something else, I mean, different from being deficient would be, I guess, would be a paradigm shift in teaching. Now, what I have realized that, our students, they may, okay, let me just go back to the word deficient though. They do not have the English words with them, but many of our ESL students, especially in college, they already have the concept, a lot of these concepts in their own language. For instance, I remember sometime that was many years ago, a teacher from Ames actually told me one day, we were talking about English, and said, oh, so their English is so poor, they don't even know what an uncle is, what an auntie is. And I said, they don't know what is an auntie? And I said, I think they know what an uncle and what an auntie is, okay? Because uncles and aunties are part of family circle. I said, they just don't have the word for it in English. I said, the word for it in English. And I think in the ESL sometimes we equate not knowing the language to their mental ability. You know, like because you don't know, you know, all these terms, we kind of treat them like little kids who are just learning language, when in reality they're already blessed with all this information. They just don't have that label. They don't have that label in English, for instance. Why take so long to explain what an umbrella is when you can just show one, for instance, you know, like describe it, or even allow them to check the dictionaries. I know there are some teachers who discourage using dictionaries in the classroom, but I'm actually a big proponent of using dictionaries because that's how my vocabulary improved. You know, in the early years of learning language, my dictionary was the faithful companion in showing me the meaning of the words that I didn't understand. And in language, they say, "Oh, you can guess," but you know, how well can you guess? And in order to guess, you have to know 90% of the content so that you can guess the 10%, or you otherwise you just make a lot of mistakes. And I appreciate this concept in a way because I think it gives respect to your students. It respects as an adult learner, not somebody who is, what do you call that, less than an adult. They just need to acquire the names, label things, and learn to express themselves in language. But otherwise, they are already very adequate in so many ways as far as life is concerned. So I never actually thought of it this way before. You know, although snippets of my experience told me that, you know, the students, even if they can't speak English, it's not equivalent to being stupid, for instance. You know, there's so much more that they know that they just can't express. They don't have that language. So I appreciate, you know, the emphasis, I guess, the introduction of new thoughts about this translanguaging as well as it, because we have not really encouraged that, maybe because of our, well, we believe that maybe immersion is better, even though it's not always better, at least in your case, for instance, as you said, 3 hours of just English is a waste for them because it doesn't make any sense to them. So thank you.
No, thank you, Dr. Rita, for adding to that. But that is true what you say. It's deficient here. I mean, you actually encapsulated what scholars are saying about deficient here. Just to kind of reiterate some of the points you made, it's not about them not knowing, because they actually have the conceptual knowledge, but just in a different language. And yeah, they do need to be taught the labels or phrases or words or whatever, so that they will be able to express those things in English. But yeah, so there has been this movement actually to recognize that actually students, especially university students, they're coming into our classroom not as blank slates. They're not a blank canvas, because they do have, like what you said, Dr. Rita, concepts of things. You know, you talk about syntax, even if their first language has a different syntax, but the notion of syntax is still there. They will know that, for example, they need a verb, a noun. Maybe the arrangement of that is different in their first language, but at least they have the concept already there. So yeah, like what you said, Dr. Rita, you know, sometimes in the English class, we are really just trying our best to give them the expression, you know, so that they can now express what they already know in the English language. Yeah. So I think it's more of an approach for the researchers, for the teachers, to kind of recalibrate their teaching approach, to value what students already know. Yeah. Maybe later during the break, I'm just taking notes of who I need to, what you call that, whose work I need to share with all of you. But I will be giving a break in a bit. Can I give a break, Dr. Nakon? Is that okay?
Yes, you can give a break. Yes.
So I will
Yes.
share. Thank you, Dr. Nakon. I will share with you if I can find the PDF file, because Dr. Rita mentioned this, I will share with you a paper that talks about this, but it talks about it specifically in a writing classroom. Yeah, in a
That's
writing.
good. So is this a 10-minute break or
Uh,
15 minutes?
I don't know, I'm not even halfway through my slides, Dr. Rita.
No, actually, I put a break time from
Oh.
11:10 to 11:15. You know, you can still go on. If,
What time
but
is
if you
it
have
now?
questions now, you can ask questions at this
It's
time
12.
too.
Hey, what time is it there now? It's 12:55, right?
No,
That's
no,
Malaysian.
10:55.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
What
you
time is
you
the break, Dr. Nakon?
the break time is 11:10. 11:10 Thai time. Okay, sorry, Thai time.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay. 11:10 Thai time. Okay, got it. Maybe I'll talk for another 5 minutes and maybe you can have a
Yes.
break.
Yes.
And then I will share the information that I wanted to share on the chat. Yeah. Okay. Thank you everyone for putting up with me. But so far, I hope people are able to kind of follow where I am going with this talk. Yeah. So really, again, looking at the haystack, this is not to say that you shouldn't be looking at the straws. You should also look at the straws, but don't just focus on one thing, but then have a few things. Look at your own backyard, look at where you are, look at your context. And another thing that I talked about just now, an effect of this is, for example, not positioning your students as being deficient, you know, especially for us in the English language, teaching field, and also the value of other languages in our classroom. Okay. I'm just gonna skip this because I think it's clear. So because of this shift in our gaze and to borrow the phrase that Dr. Rita had used just now, and also to borrow what Kumaravadi Valu had said, you know, in today's world of applied linguistics in English language teaching, can the subaltern speak up? I think this has been a question, I think that many scholars from South Asia, from India especially, have voiced out. They always talk about the subaltern, about, you know, now is the time for us to, not to revolt, but now is the time for us to make our voices heard. Yeah, now is the time for us to make the world realize the things that we do, which may be culturally unique to us, contextually significant to us. Yeah. Okay, this is going to be the slide that I will talk about before we go to our break, okay? So back to the haystack again. I mean, again, if you believe that research is an interrelated thing, then all of these things will hopefully make sense to all of us. Another big movement in applied linguistics. Oh, thank you, Diana. I will take a look at your comments later in the chat. Another big movement in applied linguistics was actually spearheaded by Alistair Pennycook. I'm pretty sure some of us have read his work. I think I read, my introduction to Pennycook was, I think, in Dr. Rita's class for seminar many years ago about language shift, because I think he had a few works on this as well, on language shift. I think he's close to retirement because this seems to be his last piece of scholarly work. He still publishes, but he hasn't introduced anything new yet. So I'm kind of guessing he's slowing down, because I know from a colleague that when she was a PhD student in Sydney, he was already close to retirement. So maybe this would be his legacy, his last legacy to leave to us in the field. But what it is saying is we need to move beyond the structural view of language, the structural view, especially, I'm not saying move away from linguistic structure or formal linguistics, okay? Those things are important because we need rules to help us understand how language is produced. But what I am saying here is how we find meaning in language, okay? How does language become meaningful to us, especially when we relate it to the social life, to our own personal lives? So Pennycook here is advocating for a move from, you know, structural to post-structural. Again, I think this topic is very close to people in literature, like Dr. Jabba and Mr. Joy, because I think you guys talk about postmodernism, post-structuralism more openly than us in English language teaching. But yeah, so this movement is happening in applied linguistics. So basically, Pennycook is saying the world doesn't revolve around just people. How you experience the world is not defined by only yourself, by you, your perception. You know, there are things around you that will add to that experience. Okay, so I guess there is a call to kind of decenter the human experience and how people label things, and what you call that? People are now more open to looking at other objects around them as a significant factor that might what you call that affect or if affect how students learn or how a person lives. Again, before the break, let me give you an example, just like AI tools, ChatGPT. I don't think any of us here, well, I shouldn't be speaking on behalf of everyone, but at least for myself, last semester, I never said anything about, using ChatGPT as a resource, to understand something. But I found out that students, university students are like adults, like they're in their 20s, and especially in Malaysia, because they have to finish 2 years of A levels, right? Or at least a year and a half of matriculation or something like that. So when they come to uni, they are in their early 20s. So I'm pretty sure they have some level of maturity already. They know how to think, they know how to source for information. And some of them actually, for one of my assignments, they have to explain a concept, in 4 minutes, a concept that is relevant to their field. And some of them actually ask ChatGPT to help them not to build the presentation, but to look for information. And I never told my students that to do that. So this is what I mean. Things don't just center around the human per se. Things can happen on the person's own volition. So I should never take credit, or I should never claim that it was because of me that my students explored AI tools. No. I think it's because of what is going on around them, what they're hearing from around them in their environment, that they kind of catch wind of this thing, and they try it out for themselves. So I as their lecturer, I can never claim credit for that. That's a simple example. We'll talk more about this after the break. Yeah, and I will take a look at the chats, and I will share the sources I was just talking about just now. Yeah. So break, yeah, Dr. Nakon.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Daron Lu. Yes, we can take a 5 minutes break and come back. Yes, you have a few more slides to share, right, Dr. Daron Lu, after this, or
Oh, so many, and
how many?
an activity as well.
Okay, because I slot the time for Q&A session too.
Oh, okay,
So
sure.
okay, yes.
Can.
Okay, so take a break.
there, and count back.
Okay, Dr. Roundu, I think we can move on, right? Do you have some more slides to share? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we
But anyway,
can make use of time. Yes.
yeah, thank you, Dr.
Okay.
Nakon. I will be mindful of time. What you call that? Did you get the file? Did everyone get the file in the? Okay, I think it works, right? Oh, okay. The file works, right? Diana can download in the chat, from the chat.
The resource of the two
Yeah.
sources, right? From
Yeah.
Bailey and
Because I was shifting Wi-Fi connections just now. I don't know if they went through, right?
yes,
Oh, okay, okay.
Bailey's and
Yep.
publication, right?
Yeah, PDF file. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah. So I think these are, I think, good papers to draw inspiration from. Yeah. The one by Ferguson I was talking about a while ago, and then the paper, writing program and the view of students as being deficient, like what Dr. Rita was talking about. I think Ursula Wingate is a person you want to read up on. She does a lot of work in writing, academic writing at the university. So if that's something that you are interested in, that area, I think you should consider her works. Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna skip. Okay, so a while ago I talked about, I should never claim credit for introducing AI tools to my students because they themselves kind of what you call that, got comfortable with it, without me prompting them. So this semester, and also because the universities in Malaysia were told that they should think of ways to positively embrace AI tools in the way in our classrooms. So this semester we finally kind of made some official guidelines and policies as to how these AI tools can be used to enhance what students experience in the classroom. Yeah. We are still very cautious with certain things, but thankfully the way that our courses here are built can in a way ensure students do their work independently, and there is still some originality in their work, mainly because we don't have tests here in all of the English classes. We have continuous assessment. And for example, in my writing class, research writing class, students have to write literally with pen in the classroom. So what you call that? So that kind of helps in a way. Yeah, to kind of maintain work is still original. Yeah. I'm gonna talk about this briefly and then talk about the idiodynamic method briefly as well, and then hopefully we can move on to the Q&A after this. Yeah. So if we want to take into account the whole haystack or a few haystacks, then again, to borrow Dr. Rita's phrase just now, there needs to be a paradigm shift. we need to start considering the social material. So social, definitely, I think all of you understand what it is. That is, the people around, who are the social actors, who are people who are significant enough to change the course of teaching, for instance. And of course, the material. Material would be the inanimate objects that are around us. One very good, I think, this has allowed other people also to kind of contribute to research. For example, with the contribution of this, well, this concept, sorry, with the increasing popularity of this, it hasn't really taken off yet too. But people from library sciences are now also, they have the opportunity to talk about how students actually use the library, how students engage with books, how students use the learning space, because there are dedicated learning spaces in the library, right? So with this concept, social material concept, it gives people in the library sciences something to talk about. Students come into the library, they sit in a chair for 5 hours. What do they do? Things like that. Do they sleep? Do they actually do work? Do they actually go to the shelves and look for books? And things like that. So this concept, I think, it's very wild in a way that it opens up everything, because now you're open up to all variables, but it gives people the chance to say something about the learning experience, if we're talking about learning in higher education setting. Yeah. And for those of us in education, this is something I was first introduced to when I was doing my master's, actor network theory. I think those of us, pretty sure Dr. Nelton has heard of this before, or anyone here who has done whose background is in education. Actor network theory, how learning can be shaped by who you know in your network. If you, I remember when I was in college, back when it was Mission College, I wasn't the smartest, but I think I was very hardworking in taking notes. So I remember everyone always asking for my notes, and then they would make copies of it. Remember when we had to make copies, we had that little card, and then they would cross out our card, our photocopy. Yeah, my notes were always photocopied by people. Now that I think back on it, maybe I should have charged them, for using my notes. But yeah, I mean, back to actor, this social material concept is not new, because it has been something that has been discussed in education before, like how someone's learning is determined by who is in the student's network. And it's not just the teacher, other classmates, parents, and things like that. Yeah. So again, these things are not outlandishly new, because they are, they have been in social sciences for a while now. Yeah. It's just that it takes time for these things to take off and to gain some traction. Yeah. So yeah, social material is when we kind of consider perspectives in a more in a wider approach. Yeah. Social material has been used to look at student engagement. How do students engage? Again, like what I said at the beginning of this workshop, how do students engage with what they are learning? Not necessarily paying attention. I mean, engagement here should not be thought only of paying attention in class. Yeah. Engagement happens, even outside of class. I mean, when you want your students to do assignments or assessments, they need to be engaged too, right? In a way. So yeah, student engagement. And it has been studied through literacy's approach. And it also positions students as having the agency. I can give you some examples of some studies which have been done outside of our field. This has actually been done in engineering and in medical education, where I'm pretty sure all of you know, if you want to be a nurse, if you want to be a doctor, yes, you attend lectures for sure. But then there will be a period of time where you have to do your residency, right? You have to go and do your practical work at the hospital. A lot of scholars in medical education, not in medicinal sciences or in medicine, yeah, but people who are doing research in how to teach medicine, how to teach doctors and nurses, they have actually used this social material approach to understand the dynamics of power between the supervising doctor, when the what you call that, the practical doctor students are doing their rounds in the ward, then they have to report to a supervisor. They're looking at the how do they engage with one another. They look at the power dynamics between the two. How do the supervisors give feedback to these doctors in training and things like that. And how does the experience in the ward, doing rounds in the ward, actually help the students kind of solidify what they understand about what they're learning in their lectures, okay, from that practical experience. So something that we can consider also in our class. I have taken this up a few years ago when I was working in Singapore. The center there was very hard on our feedback. Believe it or not, our feedback that we give our students is actually checked by other people when they do audit. So we have to be very, very careful when we give feedback because all of our feedback and all of the students' work need to be done on Turnitin, for instance. So everything is there. What you call that? For our admin to see, our management to see. So I was actually taking a look at feedback and how it actually prompts students to make corrections on their work and how far they go in looking for help to address a feedback that I gave. Okay, did they use notes that I gave in class to help them understand my feedback, or did they search beyond that? That's one thing that I did. Another thing that I did was vocabulary acquisition, actually. This goes back to what Dr. Rita was saying a while ago about, students do have the concept. And when I was working in Singapore and also here, students do have the concept because they're encountering English outside of my classroom. It's not just my class where they have encounters with English, but outside as well. So I was using this approach as a way to allow me to bring in their external experiences into my class so I can talk about those things, okay? So to me, this has been a helpful concept to help me bridge what I do in my class with what students experience outside. This whole notion of social materiality, yeah. Okay. And then finally, okay, I'll share these slides with all of you later. And then if you have questions, I am more than happy to have a chat with you at the later time or have an email correspondence with you, yeah. Okay, I'll skip this. Which brings us to social materiality, again, is like a haystack. You're looking at everything. But on the flip side, there is also this interest in the specific. And this is where the idiodynamic approach comes in. Again, this is not a new concept, yeah, everyone. This has actually been around for a few years. It just never took off when it was introduced, but now there is a renewed interest in it. Mainly because we know that it's so hard to be objective in research that includes a lot of variables. It's so hard to maintain some sort of objectivity or, sorry, not to maintain, to claim objectivity when you have so many variables. And it's so hard to claim generalizability with things like, things that happen in our language classroom. So they have shifted to this, they have kind of brought this back to life, idiodynamic approach, where you actually have to look at a few straws, not just one straw, yeah, in the haystack. And I think Dr. Nakon would have the experience of doing this because I had the privilege of writing a paper with him that took many, many years, right, Dr. Nakon? Where we looked at the translation, the collaboration between students when they were translating, texts from Thai to English and things like that. That is actually a good example of the idiodynamic approach because we were looking at very specific instances of learning and trying to get to the root of it. Okay. So for example, what you call that? If I, for example, if you can just take a few moments to look at this flow chart. So this is a class that I teach here. And in this class, I have one oral presentation where I evaluate them mainly on their speech production, organization, their use of gestures, because at the end of the day, whether I like it or not, this class is an English communication class. So I need to focus the assessment on those aspects, aspects related to communication, So these are the things, this is an assignment that they need to do, oral presentation of a concept. They need to read articles, okay? And then they have to identify information related to the concept. I use Control F here. Everyone knows what Control F is, right? On the keyboard when you need to find something. I wrote Control F there because students are looking at the articles in PDF format. So for example, last year I had a group of international relations students, and they were taking a class in political science, and one of their readings was on
ขับรถ
anarchy.
ไปน้ำมันไม่ปริ่มในตรงเหล็กแล้วอ่ะอะไรนะน้ำมันมันไม่ปริ่มตรงเหล็กแล้วอ่ะ
Vatsana, please mute yourself, Vatsana.
Okay, naman. Anyway, where was I? Yes, so they have to look for articles in PDF format. And of course, you know, when I think all of us know, you know, when we want to look for a word in a PDF file, we just do a Control F. Yeah. So after they had identified the concept, and a few students of mine talked about anarchism because that was one of their readings in their political science class. You know, what is anarchism as a concept? Yeah. So they did a Control F all across the article. They did not read the whole article. You know, we can't control those things, but I guess they searched the term anarchism and then kind of looked at those spots where the word was used and then kind of built their presentation around that. They paraphrased, outlined, and then practice. This is kind of like the idiodynamic, not kind of, this is a representative, an illustration of the idiodynamic approach where you're trying to take a look at how the learning process takes place. You're not so concerned about whether the oral presentation was successful at the end. That's another matter. But you know, when you're looking at it from a socio-material perspective, when you're looking at it from a haystacks perspective, you're taking into account the whole process. You can still zoom in and try to look at certain things. Like, for example, if you want to focus on students' creation of outlines, you can still talk about, okay, what are some of the challenges that students had when they had to, you know, digest what they had read and then produce an outline. Some of those things can be quite difficult to, you know, they read something, they synthesize the information, they digest the information, and then like they regurgitate what they had read into an outline. Sometimes that step can be quite difficult or quite challenging. It doesn't, you know, for students, it's not like a snap of the fingers. Sometimes they take time, and it is possible for you to just focus on that. Yeah. Basically, the social material approach, the idiodynamic approach is taking a look at things like this. You're kind of focusing in on what you call that, the learning process or an aspect of the learning process. And rather than the output, I mean, I'm pretty sure all of you, especially my colleagues here who have taught English, you have read countless papers about what you call that, oral presentation performance of students or something like that, right? So I'm sure so many people have read papers like speaking performance of ESL students in an oral presentation class, you know, which is like what I said at the very beginning, it's been done so many times. I'm pretty sure people are exhausted reading things like that. I'm biased there. But yeah, so there has been a movement, what you call that, looking at this. And if you want to extend your discussion on this topic, I don't know if this person is here, but Dr. Jeff would be someone you want to talk to because he did a study using this approach last year. I didn't even know. I only came across this idiodynamic approach because I was reading up on calls for papers. I always look at calls for papers and see if I can contribute something. And when I was responding to a call and I was reading up on idiodynamic approaches in the Asian context, I came across a paper that he did a few years ago where he was looking at, it was not presentation. I can't remember what it was, but it was very interesting because he was actually comparing students' anxiety level with their heartbeat or something like that, right, Dr. Jabba? Yeah. And he was focusing on a very specific learning step that was involved in the whole process. Again, this is focusing on a few straws, okay? A few variables, yeah. But taking into account the haystack where these straws come from, yeah. So yeah, if you want to extend your discussion on this, definitely talk to Dr. Jeff because he had a paper on this, yeah. I was going to ask you to to think of a process like this, but probably we don't have time. So if you have any questions or comments, yes, we have half an hour left, right, Dr. Nakwan? Let's have
We have about half an hour left. So
conversation. Yes, that's it, Mrs. Diana. That's what he did, yes. And right now he's also looking at emotions, one of his recent projects, right, Dr. Jabba? Yeah, which I think is
he's working on that topic with Dr. Jebai at the moment.
okay, good.
He
Excellent.
complete one paper, right? Emotion,
I'm not sure.
IT, writing anxiety.
Writing and speaking also, 2 papers really. Okay.
I have to thank him because he is actually the one who is always telling me, Daron, we need to help our institution. Daron, we need to help our institution.
I
And
know,
I said,
really loves this class.
okay, I will help. Anyway, yes, comments or what you call that? Feedback would be greatly appreciated. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Daron Lu. And now we will open floors to the audience to ask questions. We have about nearly 25 minutes. And so time for you. Feel free to ask him. The expert is here with us. Dr. Daron Lu is here with us. Okay. Feel free to ask questions. Maybe you can raise your hand. Yes, Dr. Rita. Yes, you can begin with.
Sorry, this is not a question. Dr. Daron was saying how Dr. Jeff was telling him we need to help our institution, right? But I said you didn't even need that instruction. You were already helping before. It was just what you call that? Probably a support, a confirmation of that. Yes, because you were already been helping all along. Okay.
I totally agree. Yes, he has been helping us a lot. I call him a research savior for FAH. Actually, he's a research savior.
That's true. That's true. Remember the time you were talking about somebody who is displaced in location and probably experienced and talking like an expert. So I can sense I think you're very wary about people who may be writing about other people's experience. Yeah. Now, well, I am thinking about, I thought about it after you mentioned, yes, probably the claim for expertise cannot be given to anyone who is outside that experience. But I also remember, okay, our previous president, Dr. Sirod, he conducted a lot of, research on underprivileged people, like even including prostitutes now. And so he of course, it was all qualitative, a lot of interviews, and it was from his presentation that we understand, we came to learn, we had the opportunity to actually hear from them now. And I guess he would not claim to be somebody who would really understand the life of prostitutes, for instance. That's not the term they use. Sorry, it was sorry. That's not the right term. He didn't use that. It was sex something. I can't remember. But now, and I think maybe research is a tool for us to kind of understand the experience of people who are different from ours. Okay. So in this case, for instance, he basically created a voice where these prostitutes were able to speak, and he also did research on farmers, and kind of understand their struggles. So I think maybe we can say that people like this will have kind of quite a bit of understanding of these sex workers. I think it was sex workers. I think sex workers and farmers based on their, what do you call that, research. And I think that's what we are trying to do as well, try to understand our students. But I would agree with you that somebody who comes from that context will have a different perspective and will speak from not only from theory but also from their experience. But yeah, I guess there is a place for both in a way. And so for many of us in this language teaching, okay, our experience, I discovered that because I learned English late in life, okay, and because I was really confused by English in so many ways and the grammar structures, I know I find it really easy to empathize with my students, and I kind of know where the confusion will be because I really struggle with that. And so I think for those for us in the local context, that means there's plenty of opportunity to actually capitalize on our personal experience. I think the movement now is to go to the context, like local, because now we realize that the Ivor Tower publication may not really represent the local perspective and experience. So thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Rita, I agree with you. I mean, definitely we still need scholars' works because they do give a voice, they give an awareness. I mean, I can give my own personal experience. I think when I came back, sorry, when I was moving back to Sabah about a year and a half ago, I got a paper out about the stateless children in Sabah and how they were represented in the media. And the issue of statelessness has been something that we struggle with in Sabah for many years, many decades, right? And yeah, I can't say that I speak on their behalf because I'm fortunate that I have proper documentation. I'm fortunate that my father became a Malaysian after he moved over to Sabah before Malaysia was formed, because in Malaysia the law is that they will always go with the father's nationality rather than the mother's nationality, right? So in that way, I count my blessings. So yeah, I guess it really requires a little bit of self-awareness and reflexivity so that we don't oversell the story. It also makes us, and when we have reflexivity, when we're really thinking about doing justice for the voices that we are representing, we are also very careful with how filtered the information is, because the thing with when we are analyzing stories, when we are analyzing qualitative data, we have to, whether we like it or not, we will have to filter it through a theoretical sieve, one way or another. In the process of doing that, we just have to be very mindful of what kinds of information we are throwing out, what are we gonna keep, and among the information that we are keeping, which one are we gonna kind of focus on or leverage on to elaborate further. I mean, those things we need to bear in mind. Which brings me to another point, and this is, I think, an ongoing development, especially in qualitative studies. Some journals actually in their guidelines, right, they have actually explicitly stated that the position of the researcher needs to be identified or written out in the methodology of the paper. And that means that the researcher, in the methodology, yes, they explain how they collected the data, how they analyze, but they also know how to explain what were their biases, if they had any, or what were they thinking at the point of working on that, to make sure that there is fair representation of whoever it is that is being talked about in that qualitative study. Yeah, so we see that happening right now in terms of researchers having to come clean with their intentions or what their position was when they embarked on that study. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rita. Yes.
Yes, you have a question, right? I see your hands on.
Yeah. I just was thinking about for writing a qualitative, doing a qualitative research on a motivation to learn English or speak in English or write in English for our Thai program students. I teach a course, a research course, and I find these students it's really challenging for them to write or speak, or they're having. And I was just thinking, how can we motivate these learners? And is this, there are only few, like 26 of our students. Will that study be worth doing using this 25 students, or is it still you need a broader a bigger number of sample students, or?
You should ask Dr. Jeff, Dr. Since you work closely with him. But anyway, no, I was just kidding. No, I have the same struggle here actually. You know, we have writing classes right here at UMS. The thing is, and all of us, you know, who work at FAH, and I myself included, you know, students' commitment and motivation to what we do, especially in ENGL, what was it before 112, 113, the you know the composition one? Yeah.
Composition 1 and 2, yeah.
Do you still have those courses today? Still
Yep.
have?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
we still have that. Yeah.
Yeah. You know those things. I mean, the motivation. I mean, of course, partly the motivation is to pass all the GE courses, right? But another aspect of motivation is actually whether or not the students find relevance in what they are doing. I think students these days are very calculative. They will only do something if there's this perceived return of, was it in business, ROI, right? Return of interest or something like that. Yeah, which is a concept you
Return
can
on investment.
investment, sorry. Return of investment. I mean, which is a concept you can probably it's a novel concept that you can probably integrate into your study, because I don't think anyone in ELT has really taken a look at that kind of and you do have a huge theoretical what you call that foundation to talk about that. You know, you can kind of premise your study on the principles of, you know, higher education institutions being very neoliberal these days, so much because of the perceptions that of how we perceive our students as customers, that kind of a thing. So customers, you know, when they are engaged in a service, they want something useful in return. So motivation, maybe, I mean, again, motivation is a concept that we have been talking for ages, right, Dr. Jaba? So how do you pitch it in a different way that might be more appealing, or, you know, it gives an alternative perspective? So maybe in that sense, you know, the relevance or the ROI of the writing course. So back to your question, I'm struggling with that too here, because our student body is huge here. Every semester we get 3,000-4,000 students at one go. And at any given academic year, there are about 10,000 students, undergraduate students. So that's a lot of marking to do if you're teaching a writing class. That's why we do continuous assessment, like write drafts, right? So that it's more manageable for the teachers to mark, because you're not marking the whole essay like it's the first time you're seeing it at the end of the semester. You have actually seen parts of the essay taking form throughout the semester. That's how we manage the marking. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. But again, how do you keep them motivated? One way that I have been trying, I'm still doing it right now, I haven't really found a sweet spot to get this done properly, is to understand their ecology, which is also another concept that's up and coming in. It's like the haystacks, you know, you take in the wide view, looking at the students' ecology. So one of the activities I do with my students at the end, at the beginning of every semester, is I actually ask them to tell me and show me their course outlines from the other courses, how many writing assignments that they have. And then from then on, of course, it's a lot of work for the teacher. But again, like what you said, if you really want them to be committed to what you are doing with them in the class, I think, I mean, it's a sacrifice that the teacher has to make. And then based on that, and then I will actually tailor the assignments, the readings, and things like that. So for example, I told you just now, last semester, I had my group. The one thing I am glad here is that our classes are by cohorts. So and sometimes you get the random student from another program, but by the most part, all of the students are from the same study program. So like last semester, I had all from international relations. So I modified everything, all the content to papers from their field. it's a lot of work for me because it's every semester I have to read something new. Sometimes I am very nervous as well because I'm coming into class with these research articles on international relations, and somehow I feel like I'm a fraud because I'm speaking as if I'm an expert in international relations. But yeah, that's something that I have to do to kind of get them motivated. And the effort is double when they don't have other writing assignments at the university. At UMS, I can tell you what a lot of lecturers like to do is, of course, give a test at the end, summative test at the end, or oral presentations. A lot of lecturers here like oral. One of the good things about oral presentation is you are grading the students there and then, in the moment of them presenting. You don't have to bring their essays back home to grade. That kind of a thing. Yeah. So yeah, it is a struggle for me too, Dr. Jabbar. Yeah. I hope that kind of gave you some insights. I'm not quite sure.
Yes, yes, thank you very much.
But yeah, understanding the ecology, I think, would be very helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, Dr. Jeffrey always tells Dr. Daron Lu is the best, and we are learning from him.
Okay, Dr. Daron Lu, I have one question to ask,
Yes.
and before others ask, I think there are some more to ask, right? At this moment, I believe that here in this Zoom platform, there are teachers who are interested in doing research, but they don't know how to begin, maybe, or some students are taking research courses. I understand that there are some students here, I see their name, they are taking research course, and now because you are expert, in what area, in what topic are on the hot train at this moment for ELT? Let's say even we are new researchers, novice researchers, if we want to work on something and we have to ensure that, okay, we can publish it somewhere like that. It's not out of date, something. Do you have any advice on this, Dr. Daron Lu?
I get most of my information actually from the calls for paper. So if you go to journals or you go to the publisher's main page, like Taylor and Francis, right? There is a section there where they have announcements and calls. That is a good place to kind of gauge what people are looking for right now. Earlier on, Dr. Nakon, I talked about translanguaging and translation, right? Translation is actually another big topic right now, especially like this year and last year, there were a few special calls on focusing on translation and food, translation and other aspects. Translation, yeah. What other topics well, that's not ELT, right? Translanguaging would be a big thing in ELT right now. I mean, there have been a few calls for paper as well by different journals, different high index journals on translanguaging and how it is used in the classroom as a way to engage with the students. Not only that, there is recently a call on how translanguaging is important for teacher educators, especially in guiding their students, the pre-service teachers. Translanguaging is quite important. ELT. I think there is a renewed like what Dr. Jeff is doing, there is a renewed interest in emotions as well. And I think the renewed interest in emotions is because of COVID-19. It was a very dramatic period of time, and people are kind of coming back. I mean, just now we talked about COVID-19 in HBDS. We're still receiving COVID-19 papers, and we were asking among the committee members, right? Do we still want COVID-19 papers? Because I don't know. Anyway, but the focus is on emotions, like how are people now post-pandemic? So are people more resilient? Are people stronger in their emotional what you call that emotional state? Would they be able to handle challenges better, since that period of time was quite challenging for many people. Yeah, so emotions is also another thing. I think there is actually a special call for paper on emotions. Dr. Nakon from LLT, language learning, and that journal. where we waited for so many years for our paper to come out. They're doing a special topic on emotions and AI tools. Another hot topic, yeah, AI tools. Definitely, that will definitely sell right now. AI, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Daron. Are there any more questions from the floor? Maybe we can entertain 2 more questions. Students what about students? Are there any questions from students who are taking research class? Or teachers? No more? Okay, Ajahn Diana, please. Yes. And Dr. Alvin, right? Pastor Alvin, okay. Yes, one from Ajahn Diana and Pastor Alvin. Okay.
Maybe Dr. Alvin can go first because mine is actually a little bit similar to Dr. Jeba. So why don't we give the time to Dr. Alvin? And if there's time, then I'll ask. If not, I'll ask Dr. Darren privately. That's fine.
My question is, because there are many challenges that Dr. Daron has talked about. When you have found these challenges, like I come from a country also with very many displaced people, internally or refugees, from neighboring countries. When you find that we are writing documentation, whether it's for you're trying to get a grant or trying to understand how people are experiencing problems in this situation, and you find that, okay, now we find there's a problem in the language. There's the language of the person who is trying to communicate their problem. That's I'm the internally displaced. There's the language of the person who's trying to find the problem, which is the person taking this. And then there's the person who's reading it as a third person. When you meet these problems, what is a useful way to try and fix it? Yeah. I'm just like, if you are, so now, I could be one of the 3 people. I'm telling, let's see, someone here who's trying to help. I'm one of the internally displaced, or I'm the person who has come to find out, how can we help you? Or I'm now the funder somewhere. And so all of us have a difference of understanding, but we're looking at the specific language. How do we harmonize this? I know that could be hard, but where do we start? Yeah, in trying to fix something like this.
I am not a fixer of things, Dr. L. Let me just make that disclaimer first. Yeah, no, the issue you had brought up has actually been discussed, not specifically in applied linguistics or ELT research, though we do find discussions about that made by David Hayes. So my colleagues in English language teaching, you can look at his work because he actually talks about what you were saying just now, the people experiencing, or the local people who are, within the problem, who are experiencing the problem, and the researcher who is in there trying to make sense of what they're experiencing and trying to, kind of re-narrate their stories into something that can be, further disseminated in the academic circles. Yeah, so he talks about that a little bit. Some practical things that I have learned over the years: always ask your participants to speak in their first language. That's first and foremost, I think a valid way to address that issue. Of course, but that also opens up another can of worms, because then you need to make sure that your translator and you are at the same plane of thinking, because how your translator translates it later to you might be skewed in one way or another. And for issues with translation, I think you can talk to Dr. Nakon. But that has always been, rather than having them speak in the language of the researcher, speak in their own language, and then translate it at a later time. But again, like what I said, that opens up another can of worms. Yeah. So far, that has been, another thing, and then if you get to the point where, okay, you have interviewed, collected data, you have their stories or qualitative data, it doesn't have to be stories. And then you wanna, put it out, get it published. or present it at a conference, always include the original language along with the translation. That always has to be there. That for qualitative research, that is one of the criteria to ensure trustworthiness, because you are presenting the actual language that was used for the consideration of the readers.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's that. The third party, the reader, we can't have control over how the reader perceives what is being read. You can talk, I mean, this is a very literary thing. I think Dr. Jaba and Mr. Joy would have more things to say about this, because, you know, literature is all about the individual experience. And the same thing with academic writing. I talked about Kumarava Devalu's paper a few times. I've come back to his paper a couple of times actually over the years. Every time I come back to his research paper, I look at it in a different way. And I think that's because my experience has, I don't know, I'm getting older and I'm getting more critical. That's why I've been making such a big fuss about, you know, are you the right person to talk about this person's story? I don't know. I'm just very hypersensitive about things like this, because I really want want people to be fairly represented. I mean, that's my motivation. That people are yeah.
Yeah, this is really helpful because I'm currently involved in a project with what is it called? It's based out of Chulalongkorn, but it's the ASEAN I can't even remember, ACWC, the
Okay.
Commission for Women and Children or something. But they have research, and the researchers who are from the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Laos, Singapore, those researchers were asked to interview people who are engaged in policy, but in English. And there was a really, big problem. Some places they couldn't find people who are engaged, especially at the local level, with good enough English. And so they're saying, but we want to get the person's best experience, the people who are actually working with women and children, and how they are experiencing these changes, especially as driven by climate change. But they're saying you have to do it in English. And the researchers were like, but how do we get them? Because we can't get the people. And so this is a significant problem. And now I'm only helping them with, making this an academic article. But the problem now is I already could see that, okay, you're asking people to speak in a language which they don't know very well. And then if you cannot speak it very well, then you're asking people who don't have as good experience. So the whole thing, how useful is our actual output going to be? So.
Can I just add, Dr. Elvin?
Yeah.
And also, once you have the data, because I'm pretty sure the project will go on, right? Whether or not. One very important consideration that you have to make is when you are looking at the transcripts or the interview data, be very mindful of the linguistic lens from which you are that you're using to look at the data. I mean, if it is something that was probably originally said in Khmer, for instance, try to avoid using your English subjectivity or your English language way of looking at things to look at that data, because that has caused a number of issues. And we thank qualitative researchers for highlighting this. Let me give you an example. Like in Japanese culture, I don't want to be stereotyping, but I think Mrs. Diana would know this, because I think this is part of her intercultural class that she teaches. Like the Japanese culture appreciates pauses, right? In a conversation, they will pause. When they pause, it doesn't mean that they don't know what to say. It's because they're just thinking. Or it might also be not wanting to say because they don't have anything to say, but because they have respect for who is researching about them. And they probably prefer not to say anything, something like that. So there was a case study about this. It was a methodology paper where the authors talk about the reviewers' feedback to them. So the paper was about their publication process and how the reviewers did not get what you call that, they did not quite understand Japanese communication culture because they were applying the way that they communicate in English to analyzing their data. So the researchers did the right thing of presenting the data, the transcripts in the paper.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the reviewers did not quite understand that this was a Japanese sample, a group of Japanese participants, and the way that they communicated was very much influenced. Of course, it's influenced by how they communicate in Japanese. It was too bad that the reviewers did not understand them, and the reviewers thought that the participants were of low quality, not wanting to provide information because they were looking at it from a very English kind of perspective. Yeah. If you want, Dr. Elvin, let me look for that paper. I can share it with you. Maybe it'll give you some
Thank
thing
you.
to
Thank you.
mull over and think about. Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah, a real practical issue. Yes, for sure.
hey, we have come to the end of the program. I don't know if there are more questions here. You can ask Dr. Daron Lu through his chat later. He can share with you his chat or his email. Anyway, yes, we have come to an end, and I want to give time to Dr. Elvin Balamba. I thought Pastor Elvin a while ago. Okay, Dr. Elvin Balamba. Yes, we would like to ask you to give a closing remarks and present the certificate of appreciation to our keynote speaker, Dr. Daron Lu. Yes.
Dr. Daron, thank you very
share the
much.
screen?
Yes, I will share the screen, but I wanted to first show Dr. Daron as we thank him for his time. It's not all the time that we have people who have been at our institution as either student or even as a member of the faculty who still consider it an opportunity to share. I know personally, we have asked in the Faculty of Science for people to help and speak to our students to present what they do in their field of work. And it's like pulling teeth from a chicken. First of all, you have to find the teeth, which are non-existent, and then you have to pull them. So it's really, really hard. And so we are extremely thankful, not only for what you've done for us today, what you continue to do for us in HBDS, what you continue to do for us in helping to support research at our university. We are extremely grateful. And so it is my privilege to, if I can share my screen. Here we go. So that I can present to you on behalf of Asia Pacific International University a certificate of appreciation. It is here. There we go. I have to put it so I can see it and then share the screen. There we go. Wrong screen. I have. There
Correct
we.
screen, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I can see it,
Yes.
Dr. Elvin.
Okay,
We
awesome.
can see the right one.
So again, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your expertise. In fact, just this short time, you've helped my project. I will go back to all those high-paying donors and tell them that we need to rethink this that you're asking of us, because we don't want to waste all of your money that you're giving us. Once again, on behalf of the university, thank you for your time, your expertise, and your continued help in improving the quality and standard of our university.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alvin. Yes, and thank you, Dr. Daron Lu, for your time. We have come to an end, and before we leave, let me remind all the audience, the participants, to take 1 or 2 minutes to do the evaluation, which I sent you the link earlier. Okay, don't forget. This is a kind of a QA work, and I think Dr. Daron Lu knows about this well enough here in Thailand, right? QA work, right? Okay, and yes, we want the participants to maybe turn on your camera. We can take photos together, and I will ask Ajahn Diana to instruct us how to take our photos. Yeah, yes, she is an expert in this screenshot taking. Okay, yes, Ajahn Diana, your time.
Thank you, Dr. Nakon. Okay, first of all, I would like to ask, I'm not so sure, is it Dr. Elvin? We can unshare the screen so we can have everyone on the same platform here. Okay.
Dr. Alvin, maybe you can unshare the screen. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you so much. So I got everyone here. Let me see. Okay, I got everyone on one screen, right? So no pages. Okay, at this point of time, I would like to invite all of you to turn on your cameras, and thank you so much for those of you who already turned on the cameras. Okay, and yes, thank you, Nisarat. I know there are three of you. You can find a screen, go inside in that mobile. Some of our students are using their mobile to access this seminar. Okay, and I think we have Achan Sundarasan, Achan Joy, Mrs. Beraliza, Nalumon, Vipapon, Saifon, Achan Champunut, Watsana. I'm not so sure who is Chai, Leandra and Kansada, Achan Duang Chai also to join us as we take this group photo. Okay. Okay. Let's just a couple of seconds more. All right. Yes, it's 12:05 here in Thailand, but let's be mindful the time in Malaysia for Dr. Daron, which is 1:05. Correct. His lunch will be later on. Okay, so we just have a couple more. Yes, Pachani, Vipapon, we see you. Very good. Okay. Nisarat and your friends, is that Dao and Nichada? Okay. Achan Jaruan, we need to see you more. I'm just seeing your forehead. Or is that your chair? I'm not so sure. Yeah, you gotta put down. Yes, let's make sure. Let me just check all of you. Okay, wonderful. Puncharat, maybe you want to remove your virtual background. Yeah, remove the virtual background. Yeah, we see the background more than you. Okay, all right. Okay, most of you are turning on your camera, so let's work with this. So everyone, I would like to ask you to look at your webcam or where the camera is. That will be more accurate. Okay. Okay, let's see. Hold on, just a moment here. Give me a moment here because I'm doing full screen. Okay, I'm going to take 2 times. This is the first time. So everyone, please, at this moment, look at your webcam or where your camera is. Okay, even though because some of you are accessing through your phones. Ready? 1, 2. Give a big smile. 3. Okay, very good. We're gonna do one more time, everyone. Okay, big smiles. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, everyone. Achanakon, I return the time back to you.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and thank you very much, Dr. Daron Lu, for your time. I know it's 1 o'clock there in Malaysia now. I think yes, lunch is late lunch for you. Okay.
No lunch.
Yeah, I will chat and give you some information from your own messenger. Okay. Yes, later. Yes, Dr. Daron Lu. Yes. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you everyone, teachers and students, for your support. And don't forget to take a moment to evaluate the event. Okay, we keep that record for our QA report. Yes, thank you very much. ขอบคุณครับ everyone. Thank you.
I'm not.
Thank you, Dr.
If
Daron.
you would like to say, yeah, hi to Dr. Daron. This is time.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not. Don't worry about lunch. I'm not having lunch. It's fasting month here in Malaysia. So there's no food literally around me. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Ramadan, right?
Yeah. This
Okay.
is the thing here in Malaysia, everyone is made to do something. Even if you're not supposed to.
next time when you are on campus, I mean, hopefully if the time is okay, like if we still have classes running, it'll be so cool if we could have alumni sharing. We had
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yesterday. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think some of
When,
the students.
when do you plan to come to AIU again?
Can someone
Oh,
call the AirAsia boss and ask him to put back the direct flight?
oh yeah. He has to take 2 flights to KL,
Yeah,
KL to Bangkok.
I'm
So he
getting
can go
older,
to
so
Brunei.
I can't be. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, and tickets have been so expensive these days. I don't know why. For some reason, these past few months, right? It's
Maybe getting close to Songkran.
yeah, and coincidentally, the public holidays for Hari Raya are on the days of Songkran, like the actual.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
wow.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, we are on Raya. No, we're not on Raya. We are kind of like on Raya break here, but we're still teaching. Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Not all of the students are here on campus, and we were told to be online.
Yeah. You know, arrange for HBDS to ask you
Oh.
to come. When they ask you to come, then
Yes.
Then you have a room at guest room. Yeah. Or you
Yes.
can stay with me. I mean, that's okay.
Yes.